Nate, thanks for coming on the show.
And I appreciate you coming out here.
I want to thank you to start for two things. Firstly, for your service to the country, to the United States, and for the sacrifices that I'm sure that you made in doing so. I try to take the chance every time that I get to speak with somebody that served to thank them for that. I feel like a lot of people take that for granted nowadays. And I want to secondly thank you for having me out here to your ranch. I mean, this is a real privilege.
Of course. Again, I'm glad you came out, and I always don't really know what to say when people thank me for my service, but yeah, thank you for thanking me, I guess.
It's got to be a little bit of a unique thing, being thanked for something that you chose to do and that type of thing. But it to me, at least from somebody who hasn't served, it seems like it's like a lost thing nowadays. People kind of just take for granted the freedoms that we have here in America, and it's something that I feel strongly about. Like I still think we're the freest country in the world, and it's incredible. And people like yourself are the reason that that's the case. So I actually want to start there, if you don't mind. Like, what led you to go to the military when you were young? What was the path to the Marines after high school?
Well, my granddad and my dad were both Marines, but that really didn't have any impact on, swaying my decision to join the Marine Corps. It was during second grade. That's when 9/11 happened. And I don't know, for whatever reason, like seeing that, it just really pissed me off as a young kid. And I didn't know anything about the world. All I knew was I wanted to go fight bad guys. And so literally from the second grade until I graduated high school, that's all I wanted to do. That was, my only ambition in life. When I graduated high school, the first thing I was doing, I was going straight off to go to war. I didn't even know what military branch it was going to be or anything. I wanted to go to war. I wanted to go to the Middle East. Just turns out that the Marine Corps infantry open contract, that was my fast track to do so. Again, I was just pissed off and wanted to go fight.
I feel like that's a common theme, 9/11. I was too young to really remember, but I hear a lot of stories about people that served, that being like they remember what that felt like, and they're like, I just need to go get in this fight and kill bad guys. Yeah. Were you, so you graduated high school and literally just shipped off pretty much right away?
I mean, within a month of graduating high school, I was gone.
Wow. And how long were you in the Marines?
5 years.
Wow. And you served in Afghanistan?
Yes.
Of all the lessons that you learned, is there any particular lesson that the Marine Corps taught you that still stands with you today?
I mean, shoot, there's a whole handful of lessons to be rolled in as one, but nowhere in life are you going to be more equally useless, really, than in the Marine Corps. And then so that's a pretty good life lesson to take with you into the civilian world, that you're not special. Your tiny little world of your wants and needs and desires don't matter in the grand scheme of life, and it really puts things into perspective that there are bigger things in life than you. So that that was a big thing that I took with me getting out, was I was on equal footing with everyone. I didn't feel entitled to anything. It's very humbling. When I first got out of the Marine Corps, the first job I had, I was riding a bicycle and delivering Postmates in Los Angeles, and not a lot of people know that, but it's like I didn't feel like I was too good to be doing something like that. I was just appreciative to have a job and like have a body that would enable me to pedal a bike miles and miles and miles to deliver food, and so that's what worked for me.
That's a fascinating lesson, because I feel like that's missing from a lot of people's lives. I feel like, especially in the West, we're so entitled.
Sure.
Did growing up in a household with, you said your father and your grandfather also served in the Marines?
Yeah.
Was there like a overarching sense of duty that you grew up with? Like, was that something they kind of harped on?
This is the polar opposite, really. Quite frankly, they're drunks. They're not motivating individuals, really. You know, the military can kind of be what you'll make of it, and you can kind of skate by and be, for a lack of better terms, a shitbag. You can just skate by and do the absolute bare minimum. That seemed more kind of what was in their alley. So I wasn't, again, like I said, I wasn't motivated to go to the Marine Corps based on them. Like, they were not something that I was really trying to emulate.
That's interesting to hear that you had two people in your life that were Marines that were, not to put words in your mouth, but I guess not living the life that you wanted to live.
Yeah.
But then you chose to go down a similar path. Do you think that was sort of to prove that you could go down that path and then also make your life into something that wasn't a negative outcome, I guess?
I don't know if I was trying to prove something to anyone, prove it to myself. Honestly, I was just a young kid that didn't have any sense of how the world worked. I was pissed off, and I wanted to fight just because I wanted to fight. And, you know, that seemed to be a common denominator with a lot of the guys in my infantry platoons. Like, whenever you get into the infantry like that, you're not exactly serving with these, you know, high honors, like Ivy League, like very ambitious individuals. Like the types of guys that the infantry appeals to, like, we're scumbags, we're delinquents, we're degenerates, we're losers, we're oddballs, we're misfits. Like, we kind of don't belong anywhere else. And then so we all just kind of form a band together. And so it's cool in a sense, because you get to see all these, you know, dropouts and misfits. You get to see them operating at their best, in a sense. It's like the hard shit that we go through, it really brings out the best in us.
That's a super unique, I've never really thought about that. And I wonder if it's probably different for different branches and different like parts of the military. But to think about a bunch of, quote, misfits coming together and sort of having that common bond of like, we weren't supposed to be here, we weren't supposed to be there, here we are, we're all similar in that way, perhaps is why the Marines have been one of the most incredible fighting forces the world's ever seen.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a reason, like, they're jarheads. It's like, there's a reason why, you know, that they want to keep us kind of pissed off. They give us the worst equipment. They, you know, they kind of deprive us of everything, and they do that for a reason. Like, would you rather be sending the guys in, you know, whenever rounds are coming down range, who do you want to be responding? The guys who are, you know, happy and living a luxurious life, or the guys who are really pissed off? It's like, you want the guys that are pissed off are going to gladly run towards the gunfire,
because they don't have the luxury that's holding them back.
Yeah.
When you think about the Vikings are an example of a people that would, as far as I understand, get like belligerently drunk the night before, and like as I've heard stories about like hallucinogens and just insane amounts of alcohol being used the night before like a battle or pillaging. And you think about why that would be, or why that would be like a good thing. And I think it actually stems to exactly your point. Like, they just woke up infuriated, probably not feeling their best, but like pissed off, and said, you know what, we have a battle, we're going to go fight. That's
just savages.
Yeah, that's an incredible point. So you served 5 years. Is that the typical Marine contract? Is that the minimum, or
4 years?
4 years.
It just so happened that the way that my term went, after come back from a deployment, I got kind of yanked around to go be a combat instructor in 29 Palms. Got extended a little bit before I got out to be a civilian.
And how many deployments did you go on?
3.
3. All to Afghanistan?
No. I did a MEU, which is just, you literally float around on a boat. The only way I can kind of explain a MEU is, like, at any given point in time, we have U.S. forces just kind of stationary, floating around on a boat all over the world, so that if, something happens anywhere in the world, we have a boat with, ready forces to, deploy anywhere. So that's kind of, it's a very boring deployment, as you could imagine.
What was that like? Were you on like an amphib or a big carrier?
I was on a big aircraft carrier, and it was literally incredibly boring. The only thing to do, you just kind of like lay in your rack, and you clean guns, you do martial arts like out on the flight deck, you work out a lot. Like, you see dudes just get stupid jacked because there's a couple things going on there. One, they're not able to go out on weekends and get drunk and everything. They're kind of only eating like pretty decent food from the mess hall, and then just working out 2 times a day. And so dudes would get stupid jacked. Very boring. Not a whole heck of a lot going on there.
That's a common theme. I've actually, one of my good buddies from Atlanta was in the Navy. He was I can't remember his job, but he was on a boat doing like a naval job, a fleet job. And then I had a woman named Megan Flanagan on the podcast recently, who was a F-14 and F-18 pilot.
Oh, shoot.
And she was on a carrier too. So it's interesting to hear now 3 perspectives. It sounds like soldiers, I guess, or infantrymen on a boat is probably the most boring, because it's like you pretty much, at least my buddy had a job to do. Like, there was something occupying his mind during the day. You guys literally just got jacked pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, there are like exercises and stuff that we would do. Like, for instance, one of them, like we jumped off and we went out into Djibouti in Africa and did a desert survival course, and like went into Jordan to do some training. And then like the infantry guys, they make up a QRF team, quick reaction force team, which actually winds up being more of a pain in the ass, because like they're constantly pilots that are flying helos out to do whatever the heck they do. And then so anytime that they would fly out, we would have to put our gear on and go sit on standby while that helo was out doing whatever they're doing, because in a case that helo went down somewhere, we had to be ready to get into another and go, rescue the pilot or whatever. So it was literally just like, hurry up, put your gear on, sit, wait for a couple hours, take it off, go back to doing nothing.
Hurry up and wait.
Exactly, yeah.
So 5 years doing that. I mean, I'm sure many experiences that are probably with you today. You got out, and I remember you saying on the Meat Mafia podcast that before we were just talking, you kind of it was a pretty quick turnaround. Like, you just kind of got out and then started the next season. What was that like?
It was abrupt, no doubt, but nothing really prepares you for being homeless, like being in the Marine Corps infantry and going and being homeless in Los Angeles on Venice Beach. Not a bad gig. There's literally free showers, and just have enough money to get some food, and life's not going to be too terribly bad. So I was pretty prepared in that sense. I just wanted to go and surround myself around fitness, really immerse myself in the environment that I wanted to break out in. So I just plummeted myself in with all the fit people I could and just soaked it up like a sponge.
You don't hear somebody say that they're pretty like trained for homelessness.
Oh, I mean, you spend so much time in the field just being filthy, sleeping in dirt holes, and you'll be all right.
That should be like a Marine recruiting post.
Oh, I know.
Get you prepared.
But we will prepare you for homelessness.
Was that intentional? Like, did you move out to Venice saying, I'm going to go be homeless and see what happens? Or
well, no, not exactly. Somewhere along the lines in the Marine Corps, I developed an affinity for fitness. And so getting out, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with fitness, but I knew that's where I wanted to, put my focus And I knew that LA had, healthy, fit people with money. And so that's where I needed to be. And growing up in small town, rural Illinois, there's not a whole heck of a lot to get you going in fitness there. So I definitely wasn't going back there. And I didn't have the luxury of like a really long process of getting myself established whenever I was getting out of the Marine Corps. It's just how my I don't want to say discharge, but my enlistment came to an end. It just kind of happened abruptly. And so it was like one day I just kind of got my paperwork and they're like, congratulations, you're a civilian. It's like the day that you're always looking forward to whenever you're in. And then whatever happens, you're like, whoa, I got to like figure out like what I'm going to wear today, where I'm going to sleep, where am I going to eat? There's no chow hall. Like life is just, totally different, but you figure it out as you go.
I haven't even thought about the uniform thing. That's actually a good point.
Oh yeah.
You might not really have too many clothes. You wearing the same thing for the last 5 years.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So you don't even have the clothes that you maybe would wear. I remember you saying that you sold your car out there just to get some money. And like, obviously, because having a car out there is probably not even worth it.
Yeah. I mean, anywhere you would park, you'd get a parking ticket, and traffic is miserable. And so, yeah, having a car was not ideal. And basically everything I owned could fit into a sea bag. So I sold my car, and I actually bought a really nice bicycle. And so I was riding my bicycle everywhere, and I started going to some college and getting some personal training clients. And like I said earlier, I was delivering Postmates on my bicycle, just going from there.
I was telling you before, it's kind of inspiring to hear that, because I just moved to Austin. I don't have a house. I have like pretty much all the things that I own in my brother's storage unit and then in the back of my car. And there's something very freeing about it. And there's something that feels, I don't want to say right, but to me, it seems like it's a good thing to go through. And my coach at VCU, my 5th year of college, Coach Sean Stifler, a man that I respect immensely, he told me in my exit meeting, and mind you, like we had a really good relationship, like a mentor and mentee relationship. And he looked at me, he's like, dude, I got one piece of advice for you. Stay poor as long as you can. And at first I'm like, what is he talking about? Why would you ever tell me to stay poor? That seems like pretty bad advice. But I believe that he was advising me to, to not get stuck, like to not cause myself to get stuck in some situation because of some material desire. Obviously, I don't think he's advising to like stay impoverished, but there's a lesson in there. I think that you probably learned that lesson. Is that something that you can relate to?
Well, I think the way that I kind of decipher that is like the more things that you own, they kind of end up owning you, and they'll, like you said, they'll kind of keep you held down in a place. And it is freeing, but also it builds a lot of character. Like right now, what you're going through, it's hard to see in that moment, but looking back, all of the hard shit, every time I was at totally rock bottom, I look back at it now, I'm like, I learned some really important lessons there to like shape my character to where I am now. It's like those greatest lessons came when I was going through the hardest things. It's like when all I had was my bicycle and I got hit by a taxi and my bicycle was wrecked, like I had nothing anymore. And it's like very good lessons to be learned there. It's like you can always pick yourself up whenever you think you're at rock bottom and you go a little bit further down, you can always pick yourself up and keep on going.
Would you say that was rock bottom for you?
Maybe. I mean, I was really struggling for a long time, getting out of the Marine Corps. I didn't really have anything together. I was just a purely functioning alcoholic. I developed a just a big drinking dependence while I was in, as you know, a lot of guys do. And I never kicked it, and I just continued drinking consistently literally like all day long. I would just drink enough to like keep me, you know, a little bit numb, keep my ears lowered. That's kind of what I would refer to it as. It would numb my senses a little bit. And, you know, it wasn't until I started taking my own personal fitness even more seriously, and for whatever reason deciding that I was going to try to start competing professionally in CrossFit, that I was looking at the top competitors around me, and I'm like, these guys are certainly not drinking booze like
For pre-workout.
right, exactly, as I was. And so I just kicked that shit completely, started, you know, getting totally focused, and that was kind of the catalyst for getting me on track, having a freaking target, having something to freaking aim at, and not just being, you know, all over the place.
You see there's a phenomenon with people that are incarcerated in jail, and they're incarcerated for so long that they become accustomed to that life and the structure and the confines that you have, and then they get out. And that's why you see many people repeat offend, is they get out, and sort of like the Marine Corps, it's like just didn't have any structure, didn't have clothes to wear, didn't have like a job lined up. And they're like, life was kind of better in there with the structure, with the meals, with the uniform, all these things. So that's an interesting sort of correlation there, where you have this like almost, I mean, the Marine Corps is like structured to the max, right? There's pretty much probably one of the most structured organizations in the world. And then you get out and it's like, holy shit, like what do I do?
You're 100% micromanaged. Like almost every minute of every day is kind of accounted for you. You know exactly what time you're waking up. You know exactly what you're wearing. And you have people telling you when you're going to break to eat, like when you're going to be able to take your uniform off. And the same thing, whenever you take your uniform off, you know exactly what time you need to wake up and be in formation the next day. And so, yeah, you go from that total structure, that order, and then to straight chaos. And you have to like find a happy medium between that order and chaos on your own. And it's a little overwhelming for some people. And it's just like, it doesn't matter what it is. Like for me, it was, I want to compete professionally in CrossFit for whatever wild, stupid reason. But what that did was it gave me a clear target, something to aim at, and bring a little bit of order and structure back into my life.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about like aiming high, like aiming for something that's high.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily having a plan for it, but at least you're aiming somewhere so you know where
right.
you're going.
You can't hit a target if you're not aiming at anything.
There's a quote by Ansel Adams, I believe, who said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Mm. So there's no plan, there's no purpose, there's no step, like there's no iteration, because you don't know where you're going. So
I like that.
What do you think it was about CrossFit? Like, was there somebody that you met that clicked in your head, or why did you feel compelled to go to CrossFit?
It was a couple things. One, that was the primary training structure that we used in the Marine Corps. And it was just, there was something appealing about like fitness and the broad modalities of fitness that appealed to me, and turning it into a sport. I sucked at sports. I was terrible at any sport that required skills, which all of them do. And so there was something appealing about that aspect of exercising in such a broad modality that it didn't require too much skill. And I was a scrawny, wimpy, puny dude who just like started to appreciate exercising and fitness while I was in the Marine Corps as a way to become strong enough to do the job that was necessary of me, because I was too weak to do it. And so growing that appreciation, and then, you know, becoming a civilian, I did meet I'll consider him a mentor. His name's Ronnie Teasdale. He was the owner of one of the grungiest, like hardcore CrossFit gyms in downtown LA. And I'll say that like he was kind of like the Paul Saladino, only like 12 years ago. like he was like way ahead of everybody's time in terms of like he was talking about eating liver and kidney and heart
Wow.
12 years
Yeah,
ago.
that wasn't cool back then.
No, and he opened my eyes to like colostrum and like eating organs and everything. And he was just, you know, tearing it up in that space, super like authentic thinker in that sense. He was not like a CrossFit Kool-Aid drinker, like dork that you think about whenever you think about CrossFit. So I kind of went under him and, you know, saw how he was developing that space, and it really piqued my interest of, you know, just seeing what I was physically capable of. That was all it was. It was just a pure curiosity of like, how far can I take this? What is my body actually capable of? You know, you can look at Rich Froning and them and like see them snatching and clean and jerking this ridiculous amount of weight. I wanted to see what I could do and how long it was going to take me to do that. And it's also just one of those things that nothing happens very quickly. It's like you're making such tiny little progress every single day. It's something you have to completely immerse yourself in. It's something I spent 6 years of my life like climbing and then falling back down the hill and then having to climb again to get back to a competitive level. I just knew it was something that was going to require a complete immersion for me, because like I said, I'm not a naturally gifted dude. Like I would see guys all the time coming in there who were, you know, and no offense to you, they were, you know, like top dog collegiate, you know, football, basketball, baseball players, and they could just walk in and grab a barbell and start clean and jerking 285 just because they were, you know, built by their athletic career. I didn't have any of that. I was not gifted in that sense. So I had to work a lot harder than everybody else.
It sounds like that's what you needed though. Like that thing that you could be fully immersed in.
Yeah. That's exactly what I needed. And, you know, looking back now, I'm really glad that I decided to put my focus on that, because, you know, at the time I didn't really have any idea how much carryover there really was, but it was like slowly but surely there were a lot of carryover things that were coming from just the physical exertion in the gym. As, you know, as crazy as that sounds, like mentally checking in to like keep my awareness to like not cutting reps or doing the extra hard things in training, those things carry over into life, and they start to, you know, hold weight in making meaningful decisions or doing things that I know I should be doing, not doing things I knew I should not be doing. And it's like little ripple effects like that.
I had a guy named Preston Brees on early on. He's like the 7th episode, and he was a Army veteran. And he found CrossFit to be like a saving grace as well. And he ended up buying a gym, and he was talking about how it was almost like therapeutic. Not even almost, it was therapeutic. And another aspect of it is the community. CrossFit is very community driven in terms of working out, especially as it relates to, or when it's compared to like going to like a LA Fitness and having headphones in and lifting and then leaving. Did you find that to be a pretty similar experience or no?
I'm going to throw you a curveball here. That, and not to like bash it, but like that was actually one of the biggest things that I hated about CrossFit, to be honest with you. And I liked CrossFit strictly, purely for the aspect of exercising as a sport. So I was not in it for the community. I didn't care about like wearing the gear, drinking the Kool-Aid, talking about WODs and all that goofy stuff. And I know that's what a lot of people are into. And I think it's great if that's something that can kind of keep you on track and like, you know, help be a catalyst in your exercise and fitness. But for me, it was purely about just like competing as sport. Like I was a total rebel and outcast. I was out there competing in jean shorts. I would go to competitions barefoot just to make a statement, because I would see all these other dudes wearing all the gear, like the nicest new shoes and their headbands and their belts and their wraps and bands and knee sleeves. And I would just make it a statement to go out there in jean shorts, barefoot, and lift more weight than them, because maybe I'm just a little shithead like that, but I wasn't really that much into the community.
Have you always had that sort of like rebellious?
I mean, yeah,
tendency?
that's like I was saying about the infantry. Those are the types of guys that we find ourselves there. We're not the team sports guys. We're not jock team sports guys. We're the loser dudes who want nothing to do with any of that. So it kind of made sense that I found myself as like the rebellious kid in CrossFit, and why the guy Ronnie Teasdale was kind of the guy that I looked up to, because he was the same kind of guy. He was not the Kool-Aid drinker decked out in all the gear. He's wildly eccentric, we'll say.
I'm reminded of what you said earlier about the Marines, like being given like the worst gear and like the worst circumstances and all this stuff, and still having to perform and performing at a high level. It kind of sounds like that maybe was ingrained in you too. I can totally imagine you pulling up to a dang CrossFit event with no shoes and jean shorts and people being like, what the hell is this guy's problem? But then being remarkably humbled at the fact that you're outperforming them, because you see that a lot in baseball too. And I became a victim of this. There's a buddy of mine named Noah Ryan has this idea of like being resilient, not neurotic. And we live in a world of optimization now. Like people want to optimize, and to the point of becoming a tyrant or neurotic about it. And in doing so, your performance actually drops, in my opinion. And in my experience, I drank that Kool-Aid when I was trying to become a professional baseball player in college. I was like, I have to go to sleep at this exact same time. I have to eat this food. I have to drink this water. I have to do this, and this. And my performance dropped. And then I transferred to VCU, and for lack of a better term, I stopped giving a fuck. In a not like in a throw it away type way, but none of that optimization stuff. I was like, I'm just going to work out hard. I'm going to show up to practice. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to eat good foods, but I'm not going to like stress myself out about it. And it was the best year of baseball I've ever had. And I think there's a lesson in what you just said about wearing the gear and having the shirt and having like the knee pads and all this stuff. A lot of times that's almost holding people back. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I agree. I think everything's measured in degrees, and we develop a dependence on certain things. And there's a quote by Louis Simmons, this old school weightlifter. He says, "Don't have $100 shoes and a 10-cent squat." And I think that, it hits it perfectly. And actually, something I thought about a while back was another instance of where like fitness really opened my eyes was whenever we were leaving Afghanistan. This kind of ties straight into the degrees of anything. We were leaving Afghanistan, and we had just spent our entire deployment out on patrol bases. We had no actual fitness equipment whatsoever. We were like lifting sandbags, rocks, doing pull-ups from like a metal bar jammed into a HESCO barrier, and literally the only fitness we're really doing was like jumping waddies and wearing our really heavy gear. And then so Leatherneck is this really built up like central hub of a base in Afghanistan where all of the armed forces are, like Army, and there's even like British forces there and everything. They've got like fast food, they've got running water, and they've got really, really nice freaking gyms, like multiple gyms just decked out with the nicest gear on this base. And so a lot of these guys are kind of, stationed there, and they've got access to all this really nice gear to be training all the time. Anyway, whenever we're on our way out, we stop in Leatherneck, and that's after months of just living in austere conditions, eating pure junk food, MREs, and they just so happened to have a CrossFit competition that day that we were leaving. I was like, cool, I want to go do that. Sounds fun. I showed up and I won. I beat all these guys that were literally Like they had access to all the nicest stuff, and I showed up there and beat them. And that was really fun and cool to like to see that happen.
There's I think that's an incredibly valuable lesson though. And I think it also stems like to the homebody thing, and how it's not just like so dogmatic. It's not just like one way of training. It's not just like I'm going to do CrossFit, or I'm just going to do calisthenics, or I'm just going to bodybuild and blah, 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 down one specific rabbit hole. And that's not to say that those are wrong, but
Right.
just to think about you once again, pulling up to a CrossFit competition on a base after you'd been doing pull-ups off of a pull-up bar that was makeshift and eating MREs. I feel like that's got to give you A, confidence in your own ability, and B, it's like a reality check that you once again don't need nearly as much as we are programmed to think that we need.
Yeah,
And you can still perform at a high level.
exactly. I mean, confidence for one, but also just, I guess, more curiosity of like, okay, I can do that. Like what else am I capable of? And I was able to pull that off with next to nothing. What am I capable of, going forward?
So you're in LA, you're doing CrossFit, you're competing with that. I'm assuming you didn't drive a bike for Postmates the whole time you're in LA.
Well, so I went from pedaling a bicycle to a throttle bicycle. So I upped to a motorcycle.
Living the good life.
Yeah. That was that became kind of like my identity, I guess, of, being in LA. It became a large part of who I was and how I was able to live the type of life that I did in LA. With all the traffic and everything, I was able to get so many different types of fitness gigs from like North LA to West LA to Santa Monica to Marina del Rey, all the way back into downtown LA where I was living at the time. And I was able to just really rack up a lot of work that way, just constantly ripping on my motorcycle, splitting lanes in traffic all the time. And that was really great for getting me a lot of the experience that I got in the fitness world as well. At one point there, a pretty big kind of turning point for me was whenever I was competing, and I was probably at one of the levels where I thought I was, as fit as I could potentially be, ramping up for some of the bigger competitions in the West region. And I had a wreck that was 100% not my fault. I had a car actually do a U-turn completely in front of me while I was, open wide, full throttle, probably 50, 55 miles an hour, hit it broadside head on, probably did about 17 front flips over the top, and, woke up unconscious on the ground. And that wreck, it fractured multiple fingers, it ruptured my testicle, like ripped like every ligament in my groin, my hip flexors, my glutes, and just it really jacked me up pretty good.
And you just went straight over the top.
Yeah, it just scrambled me up pretty good.
That's a pretty serious accident.
Yeah, and so like I was saying earlier, it's like those like perceptions of rock bottom. So it's like I spent probably like 4 years building up to like this, what I thought was like the fittest version of me, and I hit that, and it's like I can't even squat anymore. I can't do anything with my body anymore. And so it kind of requires you to go back to the drawing board and like rebuild all of those movement patterns again. But again, at the time, it sucked, and it's a really hard pill to swallow. But looking back, it's like I learned so many good lessons along the way of like having to go back, reestablish my foundation, correct bad habits, and do things the right way, and build myself up, and spend another, 2 to 3 years building up just a little bit stronger than I was before.
And even, what was the recovery like on that? I mean, like, what was the timeline? How was that like?
I don't really go in. So I'll tell you what happened. The second day after that accident, I had to go back to the VA hospital, and I actually looked at my medical records, and I laughed at because they have to document like everything that's like said, and like the appearance of the patient and all this stuff. And I had to like look at my medical records a while back, and I laughed at like what the doctors were saying about my behaviors and everything in those appointments. So they told me that I needed to have a cast and all this, and I'm like, listen, I can't have a cast. I can't have a cast on my hand because I have to work and I have to ride a motorcycle. Oh, by the way, 2 days after that wreck, I had already bought another motorcycle. I had a cast on my hand, and my testicle was swollen well over the size of a grapefruit.
Wow.
And like my hips and groin would like barely let me sit with my feet or with my legs kind of straddled open like that. So I had to kind of like pick my legs up around the saddle, and like it was a maneuver to ride my motorcycle, but I made it work. And I essentially told the doctor, I can't put a cast on my hand because I have to ride a motorcycle because I have to work. I can't afford to not work and not make money. So the recovery process, nothing. Literally from that day on, I was riding my motorcycle, working, and spending any of my time like stretching, mobilizing, trying to reestablish. Like it was almost like I had dead muscles in my groin and glutes that I had to like wake them back up and get them to work again. So that's what I spent my time doing.
And then there in that is another form of training per se that you got exposed to, like another aspect of like holistic physical training.
Oh, and that's actually where I started opening my eyes to contrast therapy, which was 10 years ago.
Not as cool as it is now.
Right. I started going to a K spa, and I would hang out in the sauna, and then I would do cold because I noticed that the cold would help like ease the pain of my muscles. And so I'd spend a lot of time in the cold bath.
You were exposed to, it sounds like your CrossFit mentor and then that type of stuff. Like that was, those things haven't been cool per se, like until pretty recently. So you were doing that for a while.
No. And I feel I feel fortunate for that. And then also like that was one of the great things about being in a city like LA. It exposed me to a lot of stuff like that.
What got you out of LA? Like what was the driving factor of leaving?
Getting out of LA was, after I'd met Ramey, and, we're talking about having a family, and then also just the quality of life was not there anymore. There were multiple instances of where we were living where I literally caught a guy jerking off in our front yard looking through the window at Ramey. I caught him, like pile drive the crap out of him in the middle of the road. I was having chickens in our yard. We had homeless come up, steal 2 of my chickens. I found him. I did the same thing to him, brought my chickens home.
Yeah, I was about to ask, did you get the chickens?
We'd have bums literally coming up into our yard, like pooping in our yard. We had a transient like posing as a grocery delivery guy, just walk right into our house. I caught him, did the same thing to him.
Common theme here.
Common theme. Yeah. And so, as our relationship is, progressing and getting more serious, and we're talking about a family, we're like, do we really want to raise a family in this environment? Not really. There was also more kind of catalyst in terms of like, I was raising chickens, and I was starting to really become fascinated with this idea of getting closer to our food and like closing the loop and becoming more, self-sustainable. And so this way of life that we have out here affords us that.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common theme I've heard about cities like LA, New York. I mean, really the urban area of like most cities nowadays. I feel even Austin, like 45 minutes from here, we were just talking about it. It doesn't seem like a good place to raise a family. The quality of life is so low. And I heard you talk about this with Harry and Brett, like especially coming out of the military, being a combat veteran. I think you said something like it's just not the best place like that type of environment for a combat veteran?
Well, I mean, you're exposed to so much stimulus at all times. Like, and for a lack of better terms, a lot of us, we're a little bit more hyper vigilant. Like our awareness is up, our ears are up. And so when we're exposed to that much going on around us all the time, like my thing to cling to was just enough booze to like lower all that, so I'm not, constantly on edge. But then, when we get out here, there's not so much going on around. You're able to kind of, lower your ears and, calm down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, even spending any amount of time out in a place like this where there's less cell towers, there's less Wi-Fi, there's less Bluetooth, there's less electronics and like the EMF radiation of all that stuff. That's a lesser known thing in like the public, like the common health and wellness space, but I 100% believe that has a really negative impact on our health. And I can totally imagine somebody you're kind of trained to be that way, to be hyper vigilant. Not even kind of.
You have to.
And so coming out in a place like this where there's only so many people that you have to focus on, you know them better than you know a stranger in downtown Austin. You have animals that you're interacting with. You're out in nature, you're out in the sun, you're breathing in fresh air. There's less like actual technology to be surrounded by. I can 100% see how that would be pretty cathartic, and the draw would be real. Did y'all like say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and start? Because I mean, you're a first generation rancher in this sense, correct?
Correct. I mean, I grew up farming in Illinois, raising sheep, goats, cows, pigs, chickens, a lot of row crops, but everything in farming is contextual. So, farming in Georgia, farming in Illinois, farming in this part of Texas, hell, farming, 10 miles east of me in Texas is pretty completely different, just based on the landscape and the environment that you're afforded. So a lot of what I grew up doing doesn't really apply here. It's been a lot of trial and error, figuring out what variables work best in this environment that I'm on, which ones are gonna, regenerate the soil, which ones are gonna be healthy and thrive during tough droughts, and just kind of responding to what works well and what does not thrive here.
Was it a pretty big learning curve?
Oh yeah, every day I still learning. I go out every single morning and I learn that something I did yesterday was really stupid and I should never do that again. Honestly, every single day I'm learning something new.
It's so humbling though. I mean, I've never been in a ranching life, but I feel like that would be so humbling. It kind of stems, frankly, to the Tyro experience. And I sent you that message. Tyro is a novice or beginner, and stems from the Latin word young soldier, somebody who is a new military recruit. It's kind of like the way that I say it, the podcast is called the Tyro experience. It's the experience of constantly learning and being exposed to your own ignorance. And then how do you rectify that ignorance? It's by showing up again and making a change. So in a lot of ways, it's like the epitome of what I perceive to be like the Tyro's life. It's something I respect greatly. I think it's an incredible way of life. Oh,
it's humbling, but at the same time, it's incredibly rewarding whenever you get something right, whenever you failed and failed and failed and failed, and then you finally get something right. That's incredibly rewarding. It's incredibly rewarding to, reap the nourishment of the beef that you spent 18 months caring for, nurturing, watching it grow, knowing it, letting it live with dignity, being a part of every process of that animal's life. Like, it's incredibly rewarding to like have just barren, dry, beaten down soil, and then, watching as you cycle different animal species on it, and you get a little bit of rain, and then you see actual grass coming up, and then you get to recycle those animals onto there to eat that grass that you kind of, some form of your creative schemata planned that for them. It's like, this is going to go completely a little bit off on a tangent, but something that I've found really interesting with this is I used to draw a lot when I lived in the city. Drawing was a creative outlet. Whenever I got out here, I never drew anymore. I stopped drawing, and I didn't really know why. And it was because my creative outlet is like figuring out solutions to all these little things out here, like how I'm maneuvering animals around, how I'm fixing things. And that's been really, really fun.
That's a unique way to perceive that. I've never really thought about that, of it being, I mean, because in the end, drawing is like an expression of creativity. Mm-hmm. So is problem solving, and this is like a practical version of that. You can actually see the physical benefit on the animals' lives, on your own life, and the land's life of you being like, I have X, Y, and Z constraint. I need this result. How am I going to do it? So that's like, I know that you got tattoos and stuff like that. So have you always had that sort of artistic, creative side?
I don't think so. I mean, I never drew or anything before the Marine Corps. I actually started drawing like whenever I was out of the Marine Corps, and that kind of, for a lack of better terms, was just due to how disconnected I was to my own self. Like emotionally, I didn't really know how to use my words. And so, you know, like you were saying, my art was like it stemmed from the words that I wasn't using. It was an expression of myself. And so like a lot of these tattoos on my body, they're my art. And for, you know, to be quite honest with you, a lot of the tattoos on my body are like kind of distancing measures. They're kind of like red flags. A lot of them are like, kind of stay away from me. They're like barriers that I put up in a way.
You think that was intentional, or at least subconscious?
My therapist says so.
I do think it's cool. Tattoos have their place, in my opinion. I have a couple.
Yeah.
They're a unique way of expressing, and you see them a lot. Interestingly enough, given your background as a warrior, you see them probably more common in warrior cultures.
Yeah.
As far back as you can go, really, whether it be like a whalebone tattoo in the Samoans or Native Americans or whatever you have, like people, it's been happening for a long time. And do you find that creativity or like a creative expression is something that veterans lack? And that's like sort of, can that be like a cause for a lot of veterans, not turmoil, but like the lack of a creative expression, I feel like might be a real negative coming out of the military. Do you think that that's common, or?
I mean, I certainly think that creativity could definitely benefit a lot of guys, but I will go into this a little bit deeper in a sense that, like I was saying earlier, who are the types of guys that the infantry, the guys who are going to be on the front lines in combat, who are the guys that are drawn to that the most? Again, we established we're not the highly ambitious, successful, high honor roll, Ivy League stud athletes that came from good families with a silver spoon in our mouth. Like, we were not awarded much great opportunities. Most of us are just total shitheads. Every now and again you get the anomaly in there that came from a good family, but we grow up in burning houses. We come from broken families. And so, like I was saying earlier, our experiences in the Marine Corps, all those tough times, they bring out the absolute best in us. And a lot of what I think post-traumatic stress disorder is it's a sense of meaning that those hard things that you went through, you're never going to experience anything meaningful like that the rest of your life. Those things that you did are the most, that's the most meaningful thing you're ever going to do in your entire life. That's the best that you're ever going to shine in your entire life. Whenever you become a civilian again, you're just another dead leaf blowing around in the wind. What you do is never going to have any meaning compared to what you were doing before. And so those guys, we struggle with that, you know?
I would argue it's probably the most meaningful thing that any human can do, in a way, which, like, the idea of, I think about like World War II. You can use any war really, but like picking up your life as a young man with, in today's world in America, you could have done literally anything. Like, we have access to more things than humans have ever had access to. More women, more drugs, more excitement, more pleasure, more stimulation, all these things. But you said, and the people that you served with said, nope, I'm going to go do this because of the meaning and the gratification of serving. So, I mean, that's got to be a unique and hard thing to overcome. How do you think, like, how do you come? Let me add this. I've heard several veterans say that, like, their days in service were either both of them together were the best and worst days they've ever had. Like, the best days they've ever had were while they were serving. The worst days they've ever had were while they were serving. Whether or not that holds true for everybody, probably not. But how do you think that you best overcome that?
Well, I think that from what I've seen, the guys who struggle the most, the guys who go through the most turmoil, which was me at one point, were the guys who only cling on to all of the reasons why we're set up to fail whenever we become civilians, which, going from a combat situation to like the civilian world, yeah, it's abrupt and we're not exactly set up for success. But there are a lot of good things that we get from the Marine Corps that we can use to really set us apart from the rest of the crowd. I mean, something just as simple as like being on freaking time. Like, in the Marine Corps, on time is late. 15 minutes is on time. 15 minutes early is on time. I've never been a smart guy. Like, I really, truly am not like a smart, skilled guy or anything really impressive about me, I don't think. But like, as a civilian, I was always 15 minutes early showing up for whatever job I was doing. And, I tried to outwork people around me. And if you do that long enough, you'll do all right. It's really not that hard. But if you sit there and sulk and, whine and complain about the negative circumstances that you've had before and the reasons why you're not set up for success, well, you're never going to get anywhere.
It comes back to that aim, I think, too.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't have an aim, there's no reason to be on time.
Exactly.
There's no reason to maintain any sort of standard if there's no, like, because the reason you have a standard is to ultimately get to a certain place. Like, you want to build up a certain level of discipline so that you can achieve whatever goal. If you don't have a goal or a vision, then, like, what's the point in, quote, showing up on time or any other like day-to-day thing?
Exactly.
Is that another thing that translates into ranching? Because, I mean, one of the lessons I was speaking to you about earlier, I spoke with Kara Smith from Colorado Craft Beef, and one thing her husband said that I absolutely love is cows need to be fed on Christmas, meaning it's literally just not an option to not do what you need to do. Is that something that translated pretty heavily into ranching?
Cows need to be fed on Christmas. I like that a lot. Yeah. They say that, like, simple hard labor is good medicine for a troubled soul. And, that's true. Like, the cows need to be fed on Christmas. It don't matter what the weather's doing. It don't matter what day it is. Like, whenever you're running a farm or a ranch like this, you've got a reason to get out of bed. You've got a reason to get dressed. You've got a reason to get out. It's a reason that's bigger than you. Kind of like in the military, the whole idea that your little wants and needs and desires are not important. You're not special. You have something bigger than you to serve. And that's like the spiritual connection of it all. You're doing something bigger than you. And that's where that, fulfillment comes from. You're getting out there, you're caring for your animals, you're putting your own comfort to the side, and it makes it incredibly rewarding. And I think that this way of life is incredibly appealing for guys that have had similar experiences to me, I think.
There's a guy named Micah Fink. Have you ever heard of him?
I've not.
He's a former SEAL and lives in Montana and has a organization called Heroes and Horses.
Yes, I'm familiar with that, and I like that. Whenever I'm talking, whenever I say like this type of work, is appealing to guys like me who have had these experiences, that is what's going in my mind. I've seen them, and I think it's incredible.
It's an incredible organization.
And I mean, the same thing kind of relates with me whenever I was in LA adopting dogs, like misfit dogs, and working with dogs that nobody wanted. It was like there's a certain like bond and connection that we kind of have with animals that we lack with other humans, I think.
100% agree. And there's also an element of like, one thing I've thought about is like the idea of grace and how an animal is like you build a relationship with your dog, and that dog, doesn't matter what the hell went on in your day, how bad your day was, what you did wrong, what you did good, whatever. You come home to a dog that you take care of and love and nurture and spend time with, that dog's going to be so excited to see you. And even that little moment, I feel like, could be the difference in somebody's life, honestly. Like, I really do. And you think about it on a scale of however many animals you have now. We were talking about like how rewarding it is when you get something right, when you actually honor an animal. It's a very unique thing. You think about, once again, warriors. What if American Indians are a great example? The connection that they had with the land, but also many of them with horses, and the way of life that they lived and how it was connected to their success as horsemen and stewards of animals, or shepherds in a way. It's a really interesting correlation. But yeah, that organization is incredible. I heard his podcast with Jocko Willink and like seen some videos about it. That to me seems like it's got to be one of the best ways to sort of flip that switch that you're talking about.
Oh, and I think, horses are just they're just such a nice pair for like, for lack of better terms, like the rough, rugged, like tough, stoic warrior or whatever. It's like these horses, they demand a mutual respect, and you learn that right away. Like working with my horses, you ain't ever gonna force a horse to do anything. You're not gonna force a horse to meet your timelines or hurry them around. They can sense everything, and so it really requires guys like us to really come down, slow down, and give that. I mean, they're big, powerful animals. You got to give them that mutual respect, and it's another one of those really humbling experiences.
You mentioned on the Meat Mafia podcast that you read, like I can't remember the philosophers that you mentioned that you read. How did you get into that?
Curiosity, strictly curiosity. Like I was saying, like I never liked reading before at all. I read because I'm curious. I read because I like to go into my sauna and read a good story, and each and every, like, I would say there's a bridge of like poetry to psychology to philosophy there. Like my interests lie somewhere there in the middle of all three of those things. And each book that I've picked up is just, I read something, an idea from another one that I really like, and it leads me into another. I might be reading a Leo Tolstoy, and he mentions Schopenhauer, and so I buy a Schopenhauer book and I start flipping through that, and he mentions, something about Machiavelli or something, and I'd go diving into that, and I don't know. It's just, I haven't really been reading so much philosophy as of late. I've been reading a lot of really good stories. Knut Hamsun's The Growth of the Soil it's been a really fun one. Steinbeck's East of Eden, like what a fun book.
My best friend recommended me that book. I haven't read it yet.
Oh, you've got to read that book. And I'm like kicking myself in the butt reading it. Like, why have I not read Steinbeck for so long. It's the type of book that you read and you just find yourself laughing out loud. It's fun. It really is.
Reading is so powerful, and today it's becoming less and less common, obviously, which is funny because more people are writing books, more and more books, less and less people actually read because of social media, entertainment, all this stuff that's at the fingertips. Do you have a particular author that you've found yourself going back to? Or that if you were going to recommend a book, like who would it be by?
William James. William James is like the father of psychology. So anything you read from freaking any new psychologist, their ideas are going to be Peterson. Everything that he's getting into, it'll be stemmed from William James. He is like the father of everything psychology. So he's a lot of fun. I also find myself always going back to Maslow because, I mean, talk about a disruptor. I mean, in the psychology field, all we ever had prior to him was, okay, we are working with people that have something wrong with them and we are going to fix them. What does Maslow do? He's like, well, I want to work with people who are really awesome, have everything together, and figure out why they are the way that they are, and maybe work backwards. So instead of just taking a bunch of sick people that have problems and diagnosing them with all their issues, why don't I take all of these like high achievers, for lack of better terms, figure out what makes them tick, what makes them the way that they are, and then we can start working with the sick people and like emulate a model from these successful people.
That reminds me of like the modern health system.
Yeah, right.
And how it's a sick care system. We're like, oh, this person's sick, let's fill a gap. This person's sick, let's fill a gap. As opposed to saying, here's X person of the population that's doing X, Y, and Z has incredible health and vitality. Maybe we should be like, what's this guy doing? But instead it's the exact opposite.
Oh yeah.
I haven't read any of either of those. William James, if I'm not mistaken, was he the one who like was super depressed and gave himself like a year? He was like, if I don't figure something out in a year, I'm going to kill myself. Are you familiar with that story? Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else.
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. But Tolstoy. I'm reading War and Peace right now. Have you read War and Peace?
Oh, definitely.
I love stories too. Mm-hmm. Count of Monte Cristo is my favorite book. Musashi's my second favorite book. Have you read Musashi?
Of course, I have it.
No, that's Miyamoto Musashi is insane.
Well, and with Raimi, she's Japanese, and so her mom's got that really like deep Japanese philosophical nature about her, and she's actually a tea master, which is very, very cool practice. And so I've been kind of exposed to that whole world as well. It's been really fun.
It's interesting reading a story so Jordan Peterson's philosophy on stories are that something to the effect of like how we see a story, and the reason they're so impactful is because, as opposed to you just sort of lecturing to me, if you told me a story, the way our minds work is I'm like, I put myself in Musashi's shoes, or into the Count of Monte Cristo's shoes, or any of the characters like Prince Andre from War and Peace. Like I put myself in his shoes. I'm like, what would I do? I'd like to think that I would act in this way or that way. So you sort of like build your own character through that. Is there any characters like throughout your readings of stories that you relate to?
The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger is one I'm reading right now. It's about this like delinquent kid who's very sarcastic. Another book that's really fun to read because I just find myself laughing. He's like this little shithead kid who's been suspended from school, and everybody's lecturing him about how he needs to get his life together, and all of his responses are just very witty and like sarcastic. And I find myself kind of, relating with him. And I think like The Growth of Soil by Nut Hampson is a potentially boring story for a lot of people, but it's about this guy, The Growth of the Soil, about a guy who he spends years and years and years like building his family and building his own homestead, and it just goes through all the good times and the bad times and all the lessons he's learning with like raising his sheep and the things that work to make the soil better and the things that don't work. And, you know, I find myself relating with him. And so I think that a lot of us are drawn to characters that, you know, we relate to for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never read that book, and I've been recommended Catcher in the Rye before, but I haven't read that either. Have you read it? Have you dove into like any American Indian stories or history, anything like that?
I've not.
There's a book, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, is, in my opinion, it's top 5 for me. It's basically like an account of all of the rise and fall. I think it's literally like the rise and Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, the rise and fall of like Western Indians or something. It's like an account of all the great Western tribes and their sort of rise and then their fall as it relates to like how the Americans and stuff like that relate. But just learning about that type of culture, Empire of the Summer Moon. I haven't read all of that, but I mean, that's literally in our backyard. Have you read that?
Mm-mm.
That's another one. Have you heard of it?
I've not.
Ooh.
Empires of the Rising Moon.
Empire of the Summer Moon. It's about the Comanches.
Okay.
By S.C. Gwynn. That's I've only read a little bit of it, but I've heard it's a incredible book. I'm fascinated by American Indians. I think just once again the warrior culture, but also their connection to land and their appreciation for land and their appreciation for animals, and in their own way, they were misfits. Like each tribe was like its own little group of misfits because they didn't relate to the next tribe or the next sect or whatever.
I mean, there's a lot of good lessons that could be taken from them for our modern ways of life now, for sure.
Have you, I mean, I'm assuming you've heard of the phrase, like, only the misfits have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I think about, and I got this from another guy who has a podcast, but it's like the idea of the average person in America right now, like more than 50% of the marriages end in divorce. More than 50% of people are overweight. And some significant amount of people have less than like $1,000 cash that they have access to. And so the idea, like the lesson in that is, it really is only the misfits that have a chance, because if you're normal, like that is normal. That's the average in America. So it's like, if you're going to be average, then those are the outcomes of your life that you're going to face. So in a way, it's like, do you find solace in being like, quote, a self-described misfit?
I think so. Yeah.
Have you ever had any fear of missing out, like leaving LA, like, and moving to a place that's far out? Like, never any of that?
I think I have the opposite of it. Honestly, I have the opposite of fear of missing out. I mean, what more? It comes down to what people value and why they value it. And more often than not, I don't feel like people spend the actual mental energy to sit down and figure out what they value and why they value it, like, long enough to truly understand. Like, I have everything I could truly value out here, you know, quiet. I have all of my nourishment. I have the woman I love. I have something to do, and I have something to hope for. So, you know, what else do I need? There's nothing I'm missing out on. That's
an incredible lesson there. Seriously. Is there a particular value that like this type of ranching lifestyle or being out here that has been strengthened since or maybe one that was like flipped?
That's a strange question that I don't even know where to begin with. Certain value that has been strengthened. I mean, my own patience. Maybe everything out here takes so much dang time, and, you know, working the animals, cultivating the soil, like procuring your own nourishment, everything demands patience. That is kind of carried over into my relationship and my dynamic with Ramey, which is also going to carry over into like having a newborn child. Like, these are things that I lacked that I really needed to develop, and in a way I developed them, you know, living this type of life, and I'm glad for that.
As you should be, I would say. Is there one of my favorite questions to ask? I was told back in college to always ask this if you get the chance to somebody who has any experience or is living in some way that you respect or admire. And it's pretty simple. It's what do you know now? Like, is there a thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 24? Which for you, I guess, would have been right pretty soon after you left the military.
Well, everything costs something, but, you know, the result of it, you can always find. I used to always think if I got a negative result that, you know, I'll just run my head into a wall, like I failed, I jacked it up. But now I'm getting to more of a point that whenever life throws failures at me, or if I invest my time and energy in something and it doesn't turn out the way that I would have liked it, it's not just time wasted. Like, there is a lesson to be learned there. I just have to be mature enough to like sit and think about what I'm going to extract from it, what I'm going to take from it going forward. I think that's something that it took me many years to start to develop, that I've developed out here. So like, I can always take away something positive from a negative experience. How about that?
That's a pretty good lesson.
I guess.
I'm taking that to heart. That's like, kind of stems back full circle to the conversation. You're talking about how rewarding it is when you try something on the ranch and you see it fail, and then you try something and you're like, oh wait, like for example, the thing, you wake up tomorrow and you realize something you did today was the exact opposite of what you should have done. Instead of being like, damn it, I messed it up, like, and just beating yourself up, you literally just take the lesson and then adapt. Yep.
There's always something to be done better, different, something to build upon here. They're like, during the times that everything is good, there's always something that I could be doing to be preparing for a future storm. And then a future storm comes and it might mess some stuff up, and I just, you know, I can pinpoint some more weaknesses that I can strengthen going forward.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's going on with Homebodies now? Anything new there?
Homebodies, we're in our 4th year. We're still putting out one workout every single week. I think I've got well over 900 workouts, follow along workouts, filmed, posted online. We've still got a really great OG community that throws down with me every single time I throw up new workouts. It's really fascinating, the community that we've got. I'll say that it's mostly like, it's a lot of like high performing moms that are like working 1 to 2 other jobs, and like they get 30 to 45 minutes while their kid is kind of taking a nap, or the other kids are at school or something, and they just throw down. And it's been such a fun project to do, really. Like because the types of athletes that I get to work with, they're not very gifted or anything. A lot of them don't really know much about how to move their body. They're kind of uncoordinated, much like me. And then so I get to watch their progress unfold, and like go from somebody who, you know, struggles with doing 3 to 4 body weight push-ups or something, to somebody who could do like devil's presses and dumbbell snatches and dumbbell overhead squats and do it very well, and just really be somebody who falls in love with the process of, you know, physical exercise, really.
And it goes back to that patience.
Exactly.
Like, it's not going to be one session that you go from doing 3 push-ups to devil's press, you know?
Exactly.
That's also a creative outlet. Like 900 workouts that you've created, that's another way to express whatever it is you're trying to express through like a creative way.
I should show. I've got stacks this thick of papers, front and back, with just programming and formulas and ideas of scheming workouts and stuff. It's ridiculous.
Do you typically, we were speaking about it before, you wake up pretty early?
Yeah, that's my quiet time.
How important is that to you?
It's important, but you highlighted something that I'm starting to more mentally prepare for with a child on the way. Like, I can't become totally like, I can't just grip that morning routine with everything I have. Like it used to be a sense of like my morning routine got thrown off. It would kind of frazzle me, kind of throw me for a loop. But now, I can't allow that to happen. Like I need to start to become a little bit more malleable. Like if I don't get my freaking cold plunge in the morning, if I don't get, 15 to 20 minutes to read, it's not the end of the world. I can make it up throughout the day. If I don't have enough time to prepare my freaking broccoli or whatever, it'll be okay. But, I like to try to afford that time to myself to like organize my mind a little bit, prepare myself for the day so that like whenever I do start putting out all the fires of the day, answering emails, chasing animals around and, doing everything that life demands, I don't have to think about what I'm going to eat or anything.
There's that element of resilience over neuroticism.
True. Yeah.
Like the routines are so powerful, and I feel like they're almost necessary to a degree. Like you need, because things are so chaotic, even on a ranch. Like you're out here in the peace, but then you have animals that you have to deal with, which have minds of their own. They'll do whatever they want. And then you have predators and all these things. So there's so much chaos that without the order of some routine, I feel like life just starts spiraling. But then the balance of it comes not letting that routine be a crutch, where then, like you said, like if you don't get exactly your routine, then your whole day's out of whack. And it's like, well, how effective is the routine if it kind of throws your whole day out of whack? It's interesting.
How beneficial is your routine if you miss something and it completely throws your entire day off? Well, your routine seems kind of, counter beneficial. So you can't have that. So yeah, it's like you're saying, you got to find that nice little medium of like order to chaos.
If there's one part of your morning routine that you had to choose, you could only do one part of it, what would it be?
The priority is always food.
Nice.
It's always food.
Yeah.
And it's not always sexy, but I need to have Tupperware stacked up of my protein, my fiber, just so that I can be grabbing something to eat and I don't have to think about it during the day.
That's interesting to hear you say, because you were telling Brett and Harry that when you moved to LA and you sold your car and you're taking showers on the beach, you always prioritize food, right? Mm-hmm. Why? How did you come to that conclusion? Like that's not a very common thing.
Just intuitively, instinctually, I guess. Like I always could just tell, like if I'm somebody who needs to be hustling like crazy and working like crazy, training like crazy, like I need to have the energy for that. And if I'm eating like garbage, like, I can only train so hard, and then eating like garbage is kind of like one step forward, two steps back, one step forward, two steps back. Kind of like, training hard and then drinking alcohol. It's like you take one step forward with training and then you take two steps back with, drinking booze. For prioritizing eating and just being that I was a scrawny runt coming up, I always knew that I needed to eat more than the other guy to like be able to gain weight, gain muscle mass. I had really no other choice in the matter than to prioritize how I was fueling myself.
When you say it that way, it is pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
And that's the harm in what we were talking about earlier, like the modern health system. It's like, you have people that will literally spend more money on gas for their car because it's better gas for their car. And then they'll skimp out on what's literally allowing them to live life, whether that be some combination of willful ignorance or misleading done by big food and big pharmaceutical companies. But either way, it just, to me, it's so strange to see that. Like I have buddies even that will like spend more money on certain things and then just eat like Hardee's. And I'm like, how does that make any sense?
Right. And again, it comes back to what's valuable to you. Like, you could be wearing a Rolex watch and eating Hardee's. Well, that Rolex watch on your wrist, that's important or valuable to you because the people's perception of you is important or something, but your own, like, I guess your own relationship with yourself is not important enough to prioritize what you're eating because Hardee's is fine for you to eat, I guess. And it was kind of funny living in LA and trying to prioritize how I was eating, but doing it on a budget. Like I didn't really have a whole heck of a lot of money at the time. And I would go to butcher shops, and this is before primal blends and ancestral blends. So nowadays that stuff's expensive. Whenever you're buying like the ground beef that's got the heart and liver and stuff in it, like you're paying a premium for it. But back then I would go to the butchers and I would be buying the organs separately because that was what I could afford. I could literally get a pound of kidney, which did not taste good, for like very cheap. And then I started asking the butchers, I was like, why don't you guys like grind this stuff up? Like grind it up, maybe mix it with a little bit of hamburger. And they're like, oh, we do. And they pointed over to a cooler. He's like, we sell it as dog food. I was like, what? And I went over to the cooler, and it said the ingredients list was ground beef, ground kidney, ground heart, ground liver. It's like, you guys sell this as dog food? And I would buy it.
Yeah.
And I would cook that and eat it as dog food.
That misfit, man. It's like it's the common theme, and you see that with raw milk in Georgia. A lot of states, raw milk is extremely regulated, which is a whole nother conversation. How absolutely asinine that is.
Yeah.
But in Georgia, for example, like I bought raw milk from White Oak Pastures, which is Will Harris. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Oh, definitely.
Bought raw milk there, and it says for dogs, and I'm like, I guess I'm eating dog food. Like that's how it goes.
They just label it like that to be legal.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's so interesting too. This is another example of you being on the front end of a curve. Like that's ancestral blends are like $14, $15 a pound now.
So since we're on it, I'm gonna tell you my next thing of like what I think is gonna be the next curve. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Bull beef.
Bull beef.
Bull beef.
I've heard about bull beef one time. Like
I think that's going to be the next thing. So like, Liver King and all them, they came along and, they made liver so appealing that like skinny LA model girls at Erewhon are like getting liver in their smoothies and stuff. So, we have the healthy and fit carnivore community that's like, really into getting beef in their system for the health benefits. And if you're talking about healthy beef, bull beef is like the pinnacle.
And it's sort of the similar like supports like, meaning like, especially for a guy trying to be a masculine, vital guy, you're thinking, okay, well, of cows, what would the option be? Bulls. Makes sense. I wonder, do you know if that's selling for less than regular beef now? I would assume.
It's just, it's just the same. That's all it is. It's just the same. I know that in like other like parts of Europe and stuff, there are places that it's kind of like a delicacy. It's kind of sold at a premium as like bull beef, like separate. But yeah, there's no label to it, but you can kind of just assume that most of the beef that you're getting is just, from a steer, because from a livestock producer standpoint, steers are much easier to handle and whatnot. Like it makes the most sense economically. Like I run nothing but bulls. Oh, so wow. I buy stocker bulls and I just keep bulls on my pasture, only bulls together. But they're more aggressive and they might cause issue to other ranchers around because they'll be wanting to break fence lines and run with the other cows and heifers around. Most guys will only just keep one bull for breeding purposes, but nature's not running around, castrating their animals and everything. And so like, this is, I guess, the more natural and holistic approach for me. And then also like my beef, which we'll have later, it's very lean. It's a very, very lean beef. Takes some getting used to. It's got a different flavor and texture to it because, just like you take a human male and you cut off all of the testosterone production, they're going to get fatter. They're going to have more intramuscular fat. And for a beef that we're eating, that's obviously what we want because it's tastier. They're getting more fat than lean meat. And then so like going back to what I was saying, in the like carnivore healthy community, bull beef is going to start to be what's sought after for its higher nutritional value, being that it's like like if you were to take a package of my beef and like, other beef that you might get at the store, like they've got that nice little red marbling going on, like red, pink, and white. Mine is just like dark, like purple red.
Almost like wild game.
Yeah.
Which I've eaten venison my whole life. I've eaten elk from my uncle a couple times. Wild hog, like I prefer that in many ways. And I think like this is so interesting too. Like you could go get a wild hog, and this, obviously raising hogs, and then get like a domesticated hog, and you understand where bacon comes from.
Yep.
And you're like, oh, these hogs live for a living. Like they don't have time, energy, or resources to just store up fat to make bacon. So, and the same thing with like a venison backstrap. Like there's no marbling on a venison backstrap. That's just
tough,
lean meat, man. And that's, in my opinion, I mean, like I love it.
You get a jaw workout chewing on it.
There's actually real science to that though. Like in terms of, I read a book called Breath by James Nestor, where he talks about all things breathing, but also how our jaw developments as humans have changed. Our jaws have become more intruded and narrower, which impedes our airways. So we're breathing worse. That's why people snore more and people have more sleep apnea. People have more allergies, all these things. And part of that is correlated to processed food movement and how, like you said, I mean, when we were hunters and gatherers, it wasn't like I don't want to eat that. That's not tender enough. Let me get this filet over here.
Yeah.
It's like you're literally having to work for your food. So
the stuff we chew on now is just so easy to chew and swallow.
Absolutely.
It's convenient.
Is there a particular part of like your ranching day to day or like chores that you enjoy the most? Just like simply enjoy?
I mean, heck, I enjoy all of it, really. I mean, the least enjoyable parts are like, whenever I have to gather all my animals. So like whenever I have to gather up like 200 sheep and like run them through the chutes and like check them or doctor them or something. Cause we try to minimize as much stress as possible, but it's a stressful thing. Sheep are sheepish. They're very flighty and they do really dumb things. And so it's like, that's the least fun, but honestly, like I really look forward to every day, getting dressed and going out and seeing what's going on outside, seeing if I got new lambs on the ground, checking my cows, like doing things and really not being in a hurry. I really try to never be in a hurry when I'm out there. Like just kind of, I never take my phone with me or anything. I might bring my backpack with my tools because there's always something to fix and I won't have my tools. So I'll bring a backpack with tools and a book, and sometimes I'll just sit out in the pasture with the sheep and read a book or something. It's all, pretty enjoyable for the most part. It's, it's not enjoyable going out there in the morning and checking animals and seeing a breached lamb with their head hanging out of the mama, like out on a 50-acre pasture, and the mama's panicked and stressed and running around, and you got to try to, spend hours courting her and trying to pull a lamb. But that's part of it. It's part of the job.
Yeah, it comes with the territory.
Exactly. So you take the good with the bad.
When you talk about like not using your phone, I immediately am drawn to like the purity of that and how our phones are so permissive nowadays, or pervasive rather. But also like, what would you possibly need your phone for out there?
Dude, the feeling when you open up your mailbox and you get like an outstanding bill from a debt collector? That's the way that I handle my phone every morning, honestly. The funny thing is I go to bed, my phone is like, I guess, dead from any time that I've used it during the day. When I go to bed, most of us charge our phone when we go to bed. But when I wake up and my phone's dead, so I just put my phone on a charger and I don't touch it till probably noon every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's like, I really think that's awesome. I think that's like the optimal way to go. You just don't need it. Like you don't need it. What would you possibly need your phone for when you're living in a place like this? You have phone, you are living a life right now where people use their phones to like try to see pictures of, so it'd be like a disservice to you and your animals and just the life in general to try to escape from. Like, why would you want to escape from it?
Most anybody trying to get a hold of me anymore is just going to be bothering me. And
Like me.
no, that was a pleasant DM. I'm glad for it. Mostly people are trying to bother me, but you get to a point too where I'm sure you just get like such a tight, small group of friends that the conversations that you have are they're not all the time. They're not really demanding. They're like small, meaningful conversations here and there. It's not too much demanding. I'm
getting into the habit of writing letters again. Like,
that's cool.
Like handwritten letters, making that a regular practice. And I have letters written to two of my best friends in Atlanta, but haven't sending them today actually. But the idea that I would rather a handwritten letter and a call every month than cheap impersonal text throughout a week. Like, I would rather delay any type of communication to have a handwritten letter and then like a 30-minute call. To me, that's more, it's more authentic, but it's also like real. Like a text in a lot of ways is like, it's just like fake communication almost. It's like it's the tip of the iceberg.
They're going to be your pen pals.
Yeah, no, seriously. I'm really trying to make that like a thing again, because it's for me, it's so cathartic to actually sit down and write to my dad about like, hey, instead of sending us, hey, just got done from work, blah, 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 see ya, or anything like that, like actually sitting down thinking, okay, what do I want to tell my dad about? What do I want to write to him about? What do I want to let him know that's going on in my life? And then I have to write it down. It's a lot more intentional than just saying like, hey, Siri, send a text.
Well, and that right there is like fighting and resisting this urge that we all have nowadays, that with AI popping off, I think that's going to really deteriorate a lot of people's creativity and ability to actually, think clearly and articulate and write. I think that's really cool, because that's becoming a lost art, really.
Absolutely. And AI is, people use that. You're exactly right. They just like replace creative outlets, and creativity, as you are well aware of now, is like, in my young life, I've already learned this, that it's a muscle. Like, I used to draw a lot too, which is refreshing to hear that you draw. I haven't drawn in a long time. So hearing you say that, it's like, I want to get back into it, but it's a muscle. Like any creative endeavor is a muscle.
Well, I mean, this whole process too is creative in its own way. Like, it requires immense amount of creativity for you, like bringing on a guest, like you're drawing a mental spider web in your head of like where you're taking a conversation, and even just the setup here, this is entirely creative. So this is you expressing your creativity.
Yeah, that's awesome. The common thing that I'm going to take away from this is like patience, accepting being a misfit. Seriously, I think that like those two things together, like being a misfit in general and then accepting that and making your own way. I saw a video recently where the guy was talking about, how do you know when you're on your path, like the right path? And he said, the way you know that you're on your right path is when there is none, when you don't see one, when you have to put a machete to the forest and make the path. And so that's sort of the same type deal. It's like the misfit mentality, and then the patience to see things through. I can't thank you enough for taking the time, man. This has been a phenomenal conversation. I also appreciate you letting me come out here. I don't take that lightly, like inviting a stranger to see your home and to be able to talk to you. I really, really appreciate it, Nate.
No, this is cool. We'll go check out all the animals after this.
Right on, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.